Morning. Morning. Thanks for attending this morning. I hope this is our purpose today is to provide some new insights and some value to you as you are working on your advanced energy, advanced water, advanced technologies, and bringing them to market with the hope of potentially utilizing public-private funding partnerships to do that, grants, incentives, and other credits. So my name is Sean Garvey, and I'm the CEO of Grant Farm. Also in the room from Grant Farm is Janet Cohen, who's going to be joining me about halfway through, and Brittany Pettit. After this, we are available for one-on-one consultation as a result of our relationship with CSU Fresno and Blue Tech Valley, as well as representatives of the CalSEED program, the California Sustainable Energy Entrepreneur Development Initiative. So if you'd like to set a time for 15 minutes or 20 minutes later today to sort of speed date on grants and your possibilities, you can talk to Brittany after, and we can schedule something. We'll be here till late in the afternoon. So before I get started, I'd love to just take a check of the room. Has anybody here ever, actually, is everybody in the room an entrepreneur? Is that why we're all here? Everybody working in energy or water or advanced technologies like that? Yes? Okay. Anybody ever written a grant? Anybody ever been successful with a grant? Excellent. We're looking for you. You need a new job? Okay, that's helpful just to understand who's in the room. Anybody see that grant funding or the utilization of other public credits and exemptions might be valuable to their company or to their technology? Is that everybody? Yeah? Okay, good, thank you. So we'll go into the next slide. And our company is Grant Farm. We have an office in Sacramento as well as in Grass Valley. We've been working since 2005, and essentially we are something more significant than a grant writing firm. We are where great ideas come to grow. Essentially, we take projects and technologies and early stage companies from ideation through commercialization, oftentimes building support from the public sector through funding, and as well as business development and commercialization relationships. We turn visionary ideas into practical realities. So we guide our clients through ideation. And most importantly is we take sometimes abstract concepts or very technical concepts and put them into language that can be understandable by reviewers at a state agency or a federal agency, but also by those reviewing business plans, those reviewing bank and finance plans, and that type of thing. So we essentially support a company in being able to represent themselves in a way that the benefits and outcomes of their technology or their product are appreciated by the eyes that are reading it. Our focus is commercialization. So while we work often in early stage technologies and with early stage companies on developing public and executing public fund campaigns, our focus is moving those companies quickly to commercialization. We're not an applied research and development firm that does not seek to help our partners move to later stages of technology readiness, like TRL 7, 8, and 9. We do this with public funding partnerships, developing business and investor plans, advocacy and outreach, or socialization as we call it internally, strategic communications and marketing, and commercialization and acceleration. We also manage the contract negotiation and management process with local, regional, and state and federal agencies for successful applicants. If you have been successful, you know that receiving a grant isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. It's the end of one chapter. And there's a whole world of new complexities that open up. You'll attest to that, I bet. Yeah. And working always towards project transformation and acceleration. We've had more than 200 successful project partners, more than $2.2 billion in projects and programs. We're actually nearing $3 billion, so this is a little bit out of date, with more than $1 billion now in public funds. Sowing the seeds to ensure the growth and success of businesses. Some of our profile projects, we've done 3 anaerobic digesters with Clean World in the Central Valley, as well as a number of anaerobic digester and compost projects with Recology. Weber Metals was has now constructed the largest metal press in North America, utilizing a mix of private funding leveraged with public grants and public incentives. Pacific Ethanol, who is a regional company, the largest producer of ethanol in the United States, we've helped them obtain about $26 million in various scale-up funds for their facilities. Inefficient Drivetrains, which builds advanced drivetrains for zero-emission vehicles. And we've helped them with 9 successful projects with partners from the U.S. Postal Service all the way up to the Department of Army and many in between, with totaling about $25 million. CalStart, we developed the U.S.-China Clean Truck Program with CalStart, as well as other projects in medium and heavy-duty vehicles nationally, including the New York Vehicle Incentive Project, as well as the Illinois Vehicle Incentive Project, totaling $148 million. And we also work very actively with ChargePoint, which is the world's largest deployer of electric vehicle infrastructure. And we do all of their grants and public bids. So I want to shift gears. That's who we are. These are bona fides. What's driving all of this? I want to give a little bit of background of where and why this funding is available. And I'll quickly go through this. Obviously, the state of California is the driver in this conversation. And one of the beautiful things about the state of California in the conversation about advanced energy and advanced water is that they have both what we might traditionally call a carrot and a stick approach. They have both regulations that are increasing in severity, depending on your perspective, as well as numerous funding opportunities that back up most of those regulations. So if you see, for instance, that California has a new regulation or one that is coming into play, which is 75% diversion of all waste from landfills. We're at about 51% right now as a state. The goal is 75%. So that's a mandate. It's been established by the legislature and put into regulation, but it comes with funding for local jurisdictions and regional jurisdictions to build anaerobic digesters, and compost facilities, waste diversion technologies, and spur on new technologies for waste diversion or waste elimination. So there's essentially six pillars of California climate change strategies: 50% renewable electricity, 50% reduction in petroleum use in vehicles, and those are the two that are driving a lot of the change. Doubling energy efficiency savings at existing buildings, carbon sequestration in the land base, safeguarding California, de-risking assets, and reducing short-lived climate pollution. And California is investing $4 billion a year to meet these energy, water, and transportation goals in 4 general areas: applied research and development, demonstration projects, commercial deployment, and market facilitation. And this is just the funding for actual energy and water projects. So one could argue that there's a whole bunch of other funds out there for sustainable housing or super train that might be considered under this category, but I'm only talking about competitive funds available for companies like yours to apply for in the advanced energy, water, and transportation. And these are in your packets, so I'm not going to go over them, but you will probably see something relating to the company or to the technology that you're working on in these eligible investments. So these are mandated by the state legislature as to where specifically GGRF monies go, greenhouse gas reduction fund monies go. But they tend to apply across sectors. So grants, credits, and exemptions. What are the value of grants, credits, and exemptions? The reason I have this slide is I want you to think about grants. I want you to come away from this conversation thinking about grants and public funding in a little bit different way, hopefully, than you think about it right coming into this room. Because many folks see grants or credits or exemptions as sort of a free handout from the state to get done what they want to. It sort of exists in the same space of collaboration. But if that's the limit to what you see a public fund plan being for your underserving what your objective is, very significantly. Because as a company that routinely works on 50 or 60 funded projects a year, we find that the success, more often than not, is not necessarily the $2 or $3 million from the California Energy Commission. And so what are they? Well, it's leveraging private capital, because almost all of the projects that we work on leverage private capital, and some of them significantly. And in a converse way, oftentimes the folks that we work with utilize a successful grant as a receivable that allows new investment, or is the lever for new private investment. So we are always advising the folks that we work with to utilize a successful grant in order to leverage more private funds into the company or project. It's a source of non-dilutive funds. So non-dilutive means the state doesn't want equity. And often it's not a loan. They don't want the funds repaid either. So it's a non-dilutive source of funds. It's a reasonable administrative burden. You might argue that. Everybody else doesn't really know. But it is something that has to be handled. It is an administrative burden, but in general, it's a reasonable administrative burden, given the fact you're getting non-dilutive funds. You're enhancing the business model for emerging technologies and reducing your cost of capital, oftentimes significantly. Many of our projects, particularly with digesters, dairy waste digesters, oftentimes with zero-emission vehicle technologies, it's not possible to create an internal rate of return sufficient enough for significant investors, except for when there's a grant available, a source of non-dilutive funds. And that can often take a project that might return 10% into a project that turns 22% and is now investable, bankable. Reduce taxes. There are exemptions that can significantly reduce your tax burden, both on property as well as equipment purchased. Regulatory alignment. But most importantly, it builds project teams that become customers and strategic partners. So we'll talk about this more later, but you should never find yourself writing a grant in which you are the sole applicant and you are not referring to anyone. Grants succeed largely in an ecosystem that includes organizational qualifications, and the strength of your partnerships is often the key difference between a winning and a losing application. But as importantly as that is the choice of those partners. So we will never build a grant that doesn't choose a partner or a set of partners in the grant that aren't ultimately a customer for the technology. So otherwise, does that make sense what I'm saying there? Okay. We'll move on. We'll talk about that more later. We'll quickly go over current funding opportunities. I'm wondering if I have that slide in here, Jen, about the outcomes. You know, this is worth saying. I don't think there's a slide in this one. But before we get into these opportunities, it's worth saying where we are in our pathway as a state, as a community of Californians that have an objective to reduce our petroleum use and our electricity use by 50%. We have, since the original passage of AB 32, 9 years ago, we've increased our population in the state of California by 3 million people. We've, at the same time, increased our gross domestic product by 30%, or $500 billion. So all of these regulatory mandates, as well as incentives, are arguably driving economic innovation and expansion of the state's economy. We have reduced, in 9 years, we've reduced the state, as Californians, the consumption of petroleum by 14.3%. Collectively, because of this, because of our own consumer choices, because of the implementation of new laws and efficiencies. We've reduced GHG emissions by 35 million metric tons a year. This year, maybe this month, or if you look at the graph, which is in my other presentation, you will see that right about now, we are about to go below 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions. which was the original objective. If you'll recall, that was the original objective, was to get us to a baseline of 1990 emissions. And you'll see that through the 90s and 2000s, we went up. And then you'll see when AB 32 passed, we started to go down. And we're about to be at 1990 levels this year because of the implementation of these technologies and the technologies that you're working with. Our renewable electricity portfolio has increased to nearly 30%. It's going to pass 30% this year early, 2 years early from our legislative mandate. It was 12%, and it was mostly hydro 10 years ago. It's now near 30%. And of course, we're going to 50. And we have, in California, created 250,000 renewable energy jobs. And in the state of California, we create 2 new businesses every single day relating to advanced energy. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So I like to remind ourselves that we're all in an ecosystem that is, in general, tracking towards success. And I think that's just important to always leave a room with that, because I know on a day-to-day basis, we're all dealing with running and funding a business and trying to bring a technology to market that is oftentimes complex. So the ecosystem we're in is successful. Let's go to the funding. Sorry, we can go back to the last one. I'm going to really quickly go over these. AB 118 has 6 different categories that it funds. It's $100 million a year. It's through the California Energy Commission. There's about 20 solicitations per year that come out from AB 118 program. It tends to focus on alternative renewable low carbon fuels, bioenergy, ethanol, and the like. It also focuses on expanding fueling infrastructure, which could include hydrogen or DC level 2 charging, and improving medium and heavy duty vehicle technologies. A lot of the port investments, for instance, Port of Long Beach, who we work with quite often, they've reduced their particulate emissions by 81% in the last 10 years. And they've done it mostly utilizing this fund to implement new technologies and innovations that then became commercially available for life.
Do you find that most of that funding is pre-commercialization?
It spans the 4 categories. So everything from applied R&D to, but it's a good question because the next program, EPIC, go on, next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. That's okay. So EPIC mandates pre-commercialization. It's in the legislation, and AB 118 tends to track that. So what you consider pre-commercialization is a whole different conversation. There are things that I think in a conversation you and I would think were commercial.
I applied that, and that was my challenge with pre-commercialization.
Okay. So next time you apply, call us and let's have a conversation. Just because there's a way to represent your innovation, oftentimes in energy, that it is pre-commercialization. Particularly if what you're doing is looking for a 2.0 or 3.0 version, you can assert that the 2.0, 3.0 is pre-commercial. So whatever innovation is being funded by the grant ends up making the technology output a pre-commercial output. Okay. That makes sense? Yeah. EPIC is funded by a surcharge on everybody's who lives in an investor-owned utility area, PG&E, and the other 2, pay 6-7 cents a month, and it totals $151 million a year in this one category, applied R&D. That funds industrial, agriculture, and water sectors, effective demand response, new software relating to grid management, vehicle-to-grid type technologies. Technology demonstration, another $145 million in this. This is for beyond applied research and development. This is where you start to argue whether or not it's really pre-commercial or not. But oftentimes, these are larger projects demonstrating, so way beyond bench scale, demonstrating the capacity and capability of the technology. And market facilitation. These are funds made available, like CalSeed. Is everybody familiar with CalSeed? You're about to be if you're not. And there is an RFP coming up in about a month which everybody should be aware of. And that's this fund funds market facilitation grants. So this is less about the technologies and more about expanding the market. And I would be remiss because Grant Farm developed the CalSeed program for the California Clean Energy Fund with other partners that included CSU Fresno and Blue Tech Valley, as well as Clean Tech Open and Berkeley Lab. CalSeed, let me just make sure, has everybody heard of CalSeed? Raise your hands if you heard of CalSeed. Okay, good, excellent. So it's new information for some people. So CalSeed has, in year one, funded 28 early stage companies, so very pre-commercial, PRL 1 through 5, technology readiness level 1 through 5, which is essentially before a commercial product has been developed. You're still in feasibility and demonstration. This is up to $600,000 once you're in the ecosystem. It prefers companies, frankly, within disadvantaged area communities, which most of the Central Valley is by the classification the state uses. Which is why I really want to draw your attention to this. In the first round, it's $150,000, plus you're in the whole Clean Tech Open ecosystem. You got a whole smattering of other legal and business development support funded through the program, so at no cost to you. And then at the prototype award, it's another $450,000. And that comes about 9 months after the concept award. As I said, there's 28 early stage companies that were funded in year one. We're about to go into year two. Brittany knows all about this program. She's essentially our project manager for a lot of CalSeed. So if you have more questions, talk to her. And if I say anything wrong, correct me. Round two starts, I believe, in the fourth quarter, perhaps first quarter of next year. There is going to be a change in this that is very favorable and beneficial to the Central Valley, in that in seeking geographic equity, as well as other forms of equity. What do I mean by equity? I mean that the proceeds of this fund are distributed with a filter for equitable distribution to disadvantaged communities, to geographies, to women-owned businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a primary objective of this program. Being in the Central Valley now comes with a significant preference within the program, meaning in the next round, each of the 4 geographies in California, Central Valley, and the Sierra One, will have 25 applicants that get nominated to the program, and will compete within those 25. So these funds will be much more geographically dispersed than the last time, and that new configuration is very beneficial to early stage companies from the Central Valley. So if you're not looking at this, it's a fairly easy application process as far as those go. Probably takes 2 or 3 hours. This is a really good place to look for access to funding as well as a larger ecosystem. And CalRecycle, the GHG Organics program, this is now broken into several programs. They're funding anaerobic digesters, compost projects. They're also funding any new technologies in the fiberglass and plastics diversion space. We just found out last night that we got $3 million for a company in Riverbank through this program to expand a facility that uses recycled agricultural plastics, which are generally landfill, and makes those into slip sheets for packaging, as well as compost and soil amendments and end product utilization. And then this is sort of the big one. This is cap and trade. Has everybody heard of cap and trade funds? So the cap and trade program in California was just extended until 2030. Makes it a much more reliable program. This is a trading mechanism. I don't want to go too deep into it because I don't understand it well enough to explain it that way. Essentially, there's a $1.5 billion in the cap and trade program each year that's been going up. That is made available mostly in grants. And you can see in the categories, if you can't, word again, unless that's me, significant portion of those funds are through the Air Resources Board for advanced vehicles. CAL FIRE, this is for forest fuels reduction using new technologies, the California Conservation Corps, food and agriculture with $100 million for methane reduction from dairies, and agricultural equipment, the demonstration of zero emission, near zero emission agricultural equipment, incentives for food processors with $60 million, another waste diversion with $40 million, which is that Cal Recycle program we were talking about, and you can see a whole bunch of others. Most of this is available in competitive grants, and each of them are put out by the agency related to these funding under a strategic plan. That's another brilliant element, frankly. You're probably guessing I'm a fan of California's approach. Is each agency has a strategic plan that's aligned with the state's strategic plan on climate, and each of their strategic plan will tell you exactly what they're seeking in terms of technology innovations and implementation over what time period. So those strategic plans are really important to inform your own grant and fund-seeking strategy. And then a host of additional ongoing funding. These are annual, generally, except for Prop 39, although it's generally annual. Parks and water bonds, the CAPE program. Many people don't know the CAPE program is through the state treasurer's office. This is a really easy application, and it exempts all equipment purchase for your company from state and local sales and use taxes. So 9% or so. If you want a 9% improvement on your project finance, you go get CAPE, which will take you about 60 days. What's that? It's 10:30. Thank you. And then EISG, California Agriculture, and the San Joaquin Valley APZ CAP program. I noticed that they just put out a workshop notice, and they're developing their next round of funding through the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District for early stage technology. Jenna, I'm going to turn this to you.
So the moral of the story that he just told you is that there is so much money coming out of the state of California. I mean, it's like, it's an unbelievable amount of money. And it's there for the taking as long as you know how to get it. I mean, it's in the billions. I used to write grants for some environmental organizations to foundations, and you need $50,000 or something. You know, there's billions here, and they have grants that they don't want people to actually apply for anything less than 5 million. You know, this sort of stuff. They don't know how to give it away. So we're here to help you try and figure out how to get them to give it to you. And for those of you who haven't looked at grants, and a typical proposal includes these elements. There's an executive summary, which you typically write last, even though it's the first on the list always. And you've got to describe your project, give a rationale. Why? What is the problem here? What are you solving? Why do they need to give you this money? And why is there urgency, and so on and so forth. A scope of work. I reckon I could now write a scope of work to get a man to the moon. It's literally, okay, what is the first step, and how do you get into the moon? What are the things in between? And you don't have to know all this stuff. Basically, you're working with a team of people who help fill in the gaps. I think there was once, in my environmental days, somebody wanted to take down a small dam, PG&E dam. And I said, okay, so we started on the scope of work. How do you do this? And he said, well, we hired the guy that took the last one down. I said, no. If somebody's going to give you $250,000 to take this thing down, you're going to have to tell them in stages exactly how you're going to take it down, how you're going to move the equipment in, how you're going to take the stuff out. All of this has to be in the scope of work, and it really is an interesting thing, because we're also used to doing our work that we don't actually go, well, how does this actually work in steps? And it makes lots of things become clear for you, actually. You've got to have quantifiable goals and objectives. They want to know what your goals are. They want to know how you're going to prove those goals. We don't say it there, but they want to know what your metrics are going to be, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions reductions or whatever it is. How are you going to, if you've got a goal, how are you going to prove that you've done it? What's going to happen at the end? Will the man get to the moon or not? The schedule and the budget, they're obvious, but they have to always match the scope of work. If you say we're going to have a team of 10 people working on getting the man to the moon, then you're going to have in your budget 10 people that are going to get to the man in the moon. And all of those, and the schedule has to match as well. Each task that you mentioned in your scope has to be in the schedule, has to be reflected in the budget. You're going to have resumes, bios, partner descriptions. You've got to show that you're worth giving money to. not only do you know your technology and you know your goals and objectives, but you are worthy people. You have done this before. You've got, tremendous degrees, but you've also actually worked for, who knows who, and you've got to show that you're actually people who are trustable. Discussion of environmental compliance and benefit. This can be a truly hideous piece of grant writing, but yeah, he's nodding. You've got to show that you've done CEQA, you've got to show that you've got all the permits, and you've got to know in advance what those permits might be. So this is, and you're going to be literally thrown in the bin if you don't get that right. You can have written the best proposal in the universe, and if you haven't got your permits and so forth together, they look for, do they not look for the quickest and easiest way of throwing you in the bin? I mean, they do, they have so many applications, they don't need to, give a pass to anyone. So you have to have every document, every order. And then you have to have letters of intent and commitment. And typically we get 30 to 50 letters of support from people, ranging from, senators, assembly people, to, well, there's no one, well, there's people lesser than that, but, to all your partners, to the city that you're in, to, we really work it, and you start that immediately, you're going to be doing. And documentation of matching funds. We'll come to matching funds later, but typically you're going to be asked to match whatever it is. Or even if you're not asked to, sometimes you're given extra points from the more match you bring. So you actually have to have that in place. You don't want to be scrambling around 2 days before the grant trying to persuade someone to give you $2.5 million to match the 50-50, $2.5 million that you're asking for. Top 10 ingredients. I think you're going to start off on
Sure.
that.
Yeah. So all of what Janet said, this is a filter. This is the filter that we go through at Grant Farm to help us be successful and help our clients be successful. We have a 94% success rate with our submissions. And so you're getting top secret information right now. Use it wisely. Take your PowerPoints home and study them because this is an important approach. Let's go on to the next slide. Number one, understanding your funding partner. I already said that every agency that has funds associated with it has a strategic plan related to those funds. Don't write a grant without reading their strategic plan. Frankly, they're easy to read, and if you're in the space, you want to be reading the strategic plans of the agencies associated with the funding you're seeking to solicit. Secondly, request prior successful proposals. So I'm sure if you don't know this, every proposal that's submitted within some reason, but generally every proposal that has been submitted in the past is available to you to look at, to receive by email. Almost every agency within 24 hours. If you say, I need the 6 winners from the last application on microgrids, you will get them in your email within 24 hours. So all of those really complicated elements that if you open an RFP and you go, damn, we can't bite this off. This is too much for us. I can't figure out how the state wants us to scope or budget or all this stuff Janet's telling me about, environmental review. You go get the old ones that won and you copy success. All right, so that's what you do. You look at how other people frame their scopes and their narratives, how other people argue for their commercialization pathways, and you mimic that. And participate in the pre-solicitation workshops. Whenever money comes out, there are workshops. Why do you go to those? Not because you want to hear somebody give a PowerPoint about the proposal, but because the room has people in it that are potentially commercialization partners. That's why you go. You're doing 2 things there. You're socializing yourself as a face and your technology to the agency that is ultimately going to review your proposal in 8 weeks. That's a good thing to do all of the time. You're also looking around the room and going, who's my competition? And who's a potential collaborator? Who's a customer in this room? Who is somebody that might be looking for my innovation in a $5 million grant? I don't want to go for a $5 million grant. I don't want to prime a $5 million grant. What I want to do is demonstrate a new microgrid software, and I only need $300,000 for it. And I'm a disadvantaged area community company, and I've got these other dynamics that came out of a university maybe, you're going to find your partner in that room that's going to want your innovation in their larger package of innovations. This is an entirely different way at looking why you want to understand the grant work, because what you're really looking at is the customer. Communicating a powerful story. Obviously, the importance of communication of a story that is readable and understandable by a reviewer. Here's another thing I want everyone to realize. At the California Energy Commission, particularly, which is the most robust funder, but also at the Air Resources Board often, which is quickly becoming the most robust funder in the space. Most of the people who are reading your applications are probably 3 or 4 years out of a college program. They're younger, they're getting paid about $65,000 a year, they're overworked, they don't understand your technology. I will guarantee that they don't understand your technology in those cases. You have to be able to explain what you're representing to them as if they don't get, they're not going to ever get. That no amount of technical information pummeled into their brain, recharacterized, is ever actually going to secure you the brain. It's the way it's framed and characterized and the language you put to it and the ability to communicate the impact and benefit of your technology, if successfully commercialized, to the California regulations that we talked about earlier. So, phase projects. This is really important. It's important to understand the proposal that you're creating as part of maybe a linear pathway to commercializing successfully. So you always want to be creating in the reviewer's minds, you're going to be successfully executing this project, and you're also going to be coming to them again for a later phase project. That's important for you as a company to be developing your projects that way, but it's as important for the funder to realize that this is part of a succession of funding. So you're creating a phase 1, phase 2. That means you don't try to squeeze everything into a $1 million grant. You do what's reasonable under the cost constraints, and what needs to come on phase 2 comes on phase 2, and you tell them that in phase 2 we will do this. That is an important part of your socialization strategy when you're talking with agencies, but also when you're talking to private funders as well.
And it's actually a very liberating thing to realize that you don't have to do it. When I said to people, you can phase this, they were, you can see the light dawning. It's actually liberating. As Sean said, you don't have to squash it all in and not make any money.
So go on to the next thing. Go on to the next slide. This is just one way we describe it as a reporter. Answering this. This is our introduction to the Recology project, and you will see the power in which the project is proposed. Recology in partnership with several partners, including an agency, contractors, or an end product user, proposing to construct and operate the Halo digester, state-of-the-art. We talked about tonnage, the displacement of diesel gallon equivalents, negative carbon intensity. So this is a very powerful paragraph here. And this is the opening to the project that scored ultimately under 88.1. It was the highest of the round, and received a total in 2 solicitations of $9 million. So this is what you want to generally mimic in a proposal, particularly on the front end. Because I don't need to understand anything about the technology inside the anaerobic digester, or some novel innovation, or new bugs that are being used, or a new spinning mechanism, or a new off-gas unit. What I get, though, is that what is being proposed is a project team that has capacity and history, and a project that meets the state's objectives. So we can go on.
I just want to say one thing about this, because it looks off-putting, and part of the problem, would generally be in several paragraphs. I know this sounds stupid, but it's all squashed in together because there's usually a space, they say you're only allowed X pages. So you'll see these horrifying looking proposals that look like, oh my God, what is in that paragraph? Which would usually be several paragraphs, but you usually have page limits or even character limits. So
Standard newspaper
yeah, so it
conventions
looks,
go out the window.
right, so I'm saying it looks more frightening than it is. In fact, it should be split in, in normal people things.
Yes.
It would be 4 paragraphs, and then it would look, you'd understand. But anyway, carry on, sorry. Oh, okay, so this is my thing. I'm a religious maniac for points. We all are. And after I've actually seen whether my people are qualified, they are 15 minutes left. And you go, after you read what it's about, you see that your people are qualified and various other things, you go straight to the match. It's always at the back somewhere. They not match the points. It's always at the back. You go to the back and you see where you're going to swallow. It is all about points. Again, in my world of environmental stuff, I reckon that I could pave over a meadow, and still get the grant as long as I get the points, honestly and truly. You prove your point, literally with the points, and you're going to get it. And it all matches to some degree what those pieces were that we showed you, the qualifications, the team capabilities. There's 15 points just for your team there, and you look at that. Did they write a good project objective and work plan? And essentially, does the budget match? Do they have match funding? Here, this is one of those measurement things. Do they get? Is it really going to reduce emission? Is it cost effective? All these things, and they'll vary completely from one application, one grant to another. But you go there first, and you do not ignore these. I've talked to grant people, at the agencies who say who acknowledge that some people don't think that the points are anything about them. That they, their project is just so great that they don't really need to heed the points, and they don't get the grant. That's the end of it. So next slide.
Can I add on something to
yeah,
that? Because this is worth the folks being aware of. Oftentimes, a creative mind that thinks logically will look at the manner in which the points are structured, or the questions are solicited, and you will see, gee, I have 20 pages. If I wrote this differently, if I structured this differently, the story tells itself better, right? I mean, that's just normal, because we look at these all the time, and we go, gee, it's really weird to write about applicant qualifications before we tell them what the project is, because I would normally want a reviewer to know what the project is in paragraph 1. Do not take the liberty of reconstructing the exact order of the scoring methodology and the questions being asked. If every RFP in California will ask you a series of questions, by category, applicant qualifications, then there'll be 3 or 4 subheads to tell us about this, tell us about that. Don't think you can just go, oh, I don't need those 3 or 4 heads. I'm just going to condense them all into one. You write to every single thing. Do not take liberties. It's not a creative process for you. You create within the words you use, but you do not reconstruct their proposal, because the reviewer is comparing you to somebody who followed every single thing, and they get to the end of that section, and sometimes reviewers only review a certain section. So you might have a review team that's only reviewing qualifications, and a review team that's only reviewing technical merit. And if you've reduced what they've asked for and done it differently, you're going to be marked down on points regardless of the power and authority of what you're doing.
It's terribly important to realize you have to follow the rules. Totally. They ask you to say something about, your children's feet. You would say something about your children's feet. I mean, you just got to do what they ask you in the right order. So next slide, please. Okay, so you can't read this terribly well, but this is like, okay, you're going to get 0% of those 10 points or 100% of those 10 points about applicant qualifications, let's say, or each one of those point chunks. And basically this one says they didn't do it, and this one says they did it really well. And I don't even bother to read that. You don't want to read anything except the exceptional, because you have to score 100%. If they're telling you how to do it, just do it. And I'm a difficult to follow the rules person. I don't do it, but when you're doing this, you just have to do it right. And always write for extra points. There will be extra points, not just, do they have partners? Do they have this? Do they have a budget? And the big one that you'll probably run into is disadvantaged communities. And I've actually told clients not to bother. I work a lot in the Sierra where they have certain sorts of disadvantaged communities, but not CEC disadvantaged communities. if you're given 10 extra points for operating in a disadvantaged community, you need to think very carefully about whether or not you should apply if you don't. Because everybody else will have, or the people who are in disadvantaged communities will have a 10% headway over you, and it's worth thinking about the competition. You need to. There are different points for all sorts of things. The match, for example, there's a lot of times they'll give you 10% if you have such and such a match. 50%. They'll give you more points the more match you have, and you have to read for all this beforehand because we walked into the one the other day, which was the CEC one, and basically went, okay, how are you going to? We really just concentrated for half an hour on the extra points. That's all we did. It was the disadvantaged community, it was the match, and there are a couple of other things. We sat there and talked about it for half an hour because there's no point in going for these things unless you're going to really be able to score as many points as humanly possible.
Let me just dismantle that just a little bit. We often say that if we're working on a project, it probably would score 80 points, whether or not we were there or not. Everybody's smart. You can follow this. But what we focus on is this extra points, because this is where you pick up points where other teams aren't being created. So let's just talk about disadvantaged communities. Most companies and projects in the Central Valley are in a disadvantaged community. That's highly beneficial. You should be applying for everything because you're getting 5 to 10 points, sometimes 15, more than anybody else in the Bay Area or Los Angeles. Although there are some DAC areas in Los Angeles, there aren't many. There are ways to bolster even further than where the headquarters or your manufacturing facility is, your disadvantaged points. You can create a partnership with an economic development. So you can say, it's very easy to go to your local workforce agency and say, once we commercialize and we build out here, we will hire, and we'll hire through you some of our positions. They will write you a letter like that. It'll take 10 minutes. It's a standard thing. That will give you extra points because now you have a partnership with a local workforce development.
Does it also work with military?
It can, absolutely. But like that. No more what do you mean by that?
Hiring, vets or
absolutely. Veterans and disabled veterans are in the DAC category. So DAC is disadvantaged. Okay. Very important. Outsourcing some of your contract to those types of entities, that can help you with DAC points. Understanding the value of your innovation to disadvantaged communities. That's an important one for calcium. Calcium, you don't have to necessarily be in a disadvantaged community to do well. But if your technology is one that is more accessible to a more equitable reach of Californians, meaning, will this reduce electricity rates or increase access for solar for people in impoverished communities? Or is it a better way to power a Tesla? Well, the one that is interested and is focused on disadvantaged communities and equitable distribution of energy is going to score a lot higher than an innovation in Tesla fuel. Yeah, sure. Robust team collaboration. This is a CalSTART project. In fact, this is the San Joaquin Valley Clean Transportation Center. Anybody familiar with that? This is anybody else? They hold an event here every year, I think, with Joe Holton.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't, and you're in this space at all, you should. His door is always open. He's somewhere here in Fresno, and it ends up being a very important partner for you in seeking funding. So a robust team in collaboration, you can read, again, it's in your handouts, the manner in which we represented this partnership. When you get through this paragraph with these types of partners, launch and manage the San Joaquin Valley Clean Transportation Center, securing funding, 40 agencies, elected officials, fleets, and all of these partners, no one can beat that paragraph. This is an exceptional paragraph from a robust team and collaboration perspective. Now, it's great that it's there for the grant. Thank you. For the grant, we're going to quickly go through the end, obviously. But what you're really doing is socializing your technology to customer groups here. Hey, we just need a letter of support. Would you like to see us funded? Would you like to see this? Would you like to see the outcome of our project? We'll give it to you. Give us a letter of support. Very easy. This is not a complicated thing. But what you're doing is you're beginning the process of developing relationships with folks that might be customers. All of these. Gives you an entree and access to going back to them after you're funded, making them part of the success, making them part of the project team, allowing them to see the technology once it's developed, and perhaps they become a customer. It's going. Let's go. I think for time's sake, I'm going to whiz through these and we will stay for questions for as long as anybody wants. Developing project awareness. This is socialization. So we take our technologies, we PowerPoint them, and we go to the agencies from which we're going to ultimately seek funding, and we present those technologies. So if it's a CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, or California Energy Commission, you have the authority, the ability to call up the California Energy Commission and say, I'd like to talk to people who are most interested there in water efficiency and ag efficiency, water and ag efficiency. They will set up a meeting for you with 3 or 4 of their best people, and you will PowerPoint them through your technology. And you will oftentimes see a proposal come out from the agency 3 to 6 months later that specifically calls out for your technology. This is a common tactic and it's a game the insiders play. It's not a game, it's a transparent process, and everybody has access to this ability. Not everybody knows that they have access to it. Now you do. That's one. Project readiness in the form of CEQA, permitting from construction to operation. This is just understanding that your project is ready to go, that it's financeable beyond the grant, that you have a fully vetted team, and oftentimes that you have site control, that you have a certain site that this project's going to demonstrate. Again, I think we talked a lot about disadvantaged communities, but understanding the strategies to getting disadvantaged community points and just keep going with this. This is more and more important in the state of California. This past year, the legislature upped the ante, and now 25% of all CEC monies have to go to disadvantaged communities. So more and more the focus is on that.
Do you find that DACs, they give, a lot of times they'll list 70% and above, right? From how you go. Do they give better points at when you're at 85% or 90%?
They can, yes. If you're in 95 to 100, you're going to get more than 75. Yes. Executable scope and budget. You want to talk?
Yeah. As I said, it's the sort of getting to the mountain moon thing. You need to be at least mapping out your scope and budget, actually sitting down and thinking about your project beforehand, even if it's, just sitting down with friends over, or your colleagues over a drink, saying, how do we actually do this? Actually stepping back so that you're ready to go when you're actually seeing a proposal. It's not like, oh God, how do we do this? The phasing we've talked about of minimizing tasks, because you could come up with a set of like 300 steps to get to a man on the moon, but you need to group them. And at the contracting agency, they don't want to contract with you with 1 million tasks. They want you to have small amounts of tasks with subtasks. This may sound academic before you've had your drink with your colleagues, but you really do need to group. And be aware of funding restrictions. You have to read the RFP really closely, because there are things that they will not pay for, and there are things that you will put in that will get you thrown out. Ridiculous things like they won't pay for food or whatever it is. But you need to really, really be sure about what they will pay for. Sometimes they'll pay for, let's say you own a building that you want to use as leverage as matching funds. Sometimes they won't let you matching funds. It changes day to day. And yeah, you need to be careful about your scope and your budget, because a lot of times they will literally take those things and build them into a contract. So you need to step back and go, would this actually be doable? Are we promising too much, etc. So be very, very aware that the scope and budget are truly meaningful, and that you need to be very, very careful about them, because they may end up pinned onto the back of your contract, and then
I'll put a fine tune on that. So you wrote a proposal with all the printouts, it was probably about that big. Maybe that big, but somewhere. Okay, ours are that big. Sorry. They strip out all of that stuff. The letters of support, the narrative, the environmental stuff. They strip it all out. We need to know this is important for how you construct a proposal. Only the scope of work and budget gets appended to the standard terms and conditions. Everything else gets lost. All that brilliance gets lost. It's very sad to us, but that is the importance of the scope of work. And the 3-task rule, do be aware that the other reason for the importance of that is that oftentimes within an agency, you can move funds within a task. You can't move funds from a task to another task. It's a weird state contracting rule. It means task 62, if you have $28,000 in that, you can't move that to task 63 because you needed that. And so if you have a multi-task budget like that or a scope like that, you get stuck with stranded island funds.
It's really awful. And they don't like it anyway. They hate you when you ask for a budget amendment.
We used to do proposals with, they were man on the moon type things, 15, 25 tasks, heavily detailed, and then we saw what it was on.
It's horrific.
Oh, it was awful.
It's streamlined. As long as they understand that you understand what you're doing.
Executing with integrity is, we're going to quickly go through that, but professional project management, staying in communication with your contract manager. Whether you like it or not, your contract manager needs to be your friend. Create a relationship there. If one is impossible for whatever reason, personality issues, whatever, you do have the authority to ask for it. And in general, they abide by it. If you want to assume an audit, that means you keep records. Whoever in your organization does that has to keep records that are auditable. And you celebrate success. You engage and include your funding partner, as well as all those other partners in the team in collaboration. You include them in your lobby dates and in your presentations and in your groundbreakings. And you take opportunities to celebrate the success. The state wants you to do that. They want you telling the public that your project is moving forward, has been funded, is now under construction, is done with construction, is now commissioned, is now online, is now producing energy. That helps you build the case for other funding to your project from the state agency. So you're creating a relationship with the state agency by doing that. And the last one, we can go on, ensuring ongoing success. So structuring for success, we've covered most of this. Request a debrief. If you don't know that, you can request to meet with everyone who reviewed your application and find out exactly why it won, which I suggest you do when you win as well, or why it lost. And they will take you to every scoring category and tell you where you lost a point, 2 points, where you could do better next time. But what you're also doing there is you're building a relationship with the people who are going to review your next application.
Yeah, I can't stress how important that is. People get terribly despondent after they don't get a grant, and it's, oh God, I'm not phoning up. You have to phone them up. It's one of the most important learning experiences.
Yes. And then the last one, I said it before, always utilize a funding opportunity as a business development opportunity. This is an opportunity to create a commercialization partner and a customer. And in more often than not, no matter how early stage our projects are that we work with, we are building in ultimate customers into our proposal. Even if by name and reference and allusion, sometimes by letters of support, sometimes by tasking them with, they get to drive the vehicle for a day, or 3 days, or a month, or 3 months, or collect data on it, or be presented with data on it, or have a voice of the customer event at their facility. But building in those types of customers early on is going to prove and demonstrate to the reviewers that you get that there is a pathway to getting a technology. I think that's it.
I just want to say one other thing, that all these people, it takes a lot of time to write a grant, whether or not you're actually doing the writing, if you're part of a team doing the writing, and it really takes a lot of thought and a lot of time and a lot of money. It can take a lot of money sometimes. A lot of what you're producing has multiple uses, and after you have written the grant, even if it doesn't win, you've got a team done that you can put in your business plan, and you've got so much stuff that you can take to a bank. You've got all this stuff can be reused. in different venues. You're actually building a funding plan, even if you don't get this particular grant. So it's really useful to think about the intense time and effort that it takes to build a grant, that you understand that it can be used in other venues, that it's a useful thing to do come what may. And that's basically it.
Yeah. We can stay for questions. We want to be respectful of your time. Before we do, I just want to take a temperature. Did you get any new information in this presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it helpful? Okay. Afterwards, or publicly tell us if this could be made better or anything that we didn't answer. But we wanted to make sure that your time was well used.
We do have one question from online, so I think we
Sure.
should do that one first. They just want to know how you can request winning proposals from the CEC. How would you actually do that?
Write to the grant, there's usually a contact person at the end of the GFO or the RFP, write to them.
Yeah. You could also, on the CEC's website, there's a list of all current funding opportunities as well as the previous ones. And generally by the title, you can tell what that was about. Microgrids, was it vehicle to grid technology? Was it new electric vehicle charging technology? What have you? New energy efficiency thermometers, thermostats. You can tell by the title generally. So you can find that on the energy.ca.gov under funding, drawdown, and you can find past proposals. So you look at the past proposals, there will be something called a NOPA, a Notice of Proposed Award. And it will tell you who won and what their scores were, as well as who lost. And you ask, under solicitation 17-301, can I have the top 5 awardees? And I want the narratives as well as the full proposal package. So, because sometimes they'll just send you the narratives, you want their environment, you want everything, because you're going to use these as standards for how you create your own proposal.
And if any of you, just one last thing, any of you want 20 minutes with us, do it, Brittany, and let's try and fit it in the slots where you're not seeing other people.
Yeah.
Because it's good to talk one-on-one with people, or one-on-two. Yeah.
How much does it cost us to hire your services?
There's a variety of ways to engage us. So we can have that conversation. There's always a cost. It's unethical in the grant world to be paid for only a success fee. Shaking hands with Grant Writers of America. Yeah, probably someone else. So we can have that in there. But, nonetheless, we have a conversation. There's a range. It depends on the dollar value of the grant. Depends on the real value of the technology, the promise of the technology, how advanced the state of content that you already have. You know, if you have a lot of drawings, that's great, but if you don't have a lot of the other materials, so it can depend. There's a wide variation.
So if I was to set an appointment, come and talk to you in Sacramento, is that where your office is?
Yes,
All right, then we could go over that and you can determine how much it would cost.
absolutely.
Meetings. Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can I get a card?
Absolutely. It's in my bag. Okay.
So thank you very much for all staying with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And